This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
So we'll start with my colleague, Dr. Mark Thurner from the Institute of Latin American Studies here at the School of Advanced Study. He's a reader in Latin American Studies and very involved in the postcolonial studies work we have going on. And I'll let him tell you more about it.
Thanks, it's a pleasure to be here. I've recently moved from the States to London and have been involved in the formation of this center. I mean, basically Latin America is the black hole of postcolonial studies. It's not there, and it never has been. I think of it sort of a missing in action. You know, we were executed by firing squad by postcolonial theory at some point, and then there was a reaction to that in Latin American studies, which was to sort of argue about the exceptional nature of Latin America. My own work has been to try to mediate those positions and try to find a way to have a conversation among difference. And so my interest really in postcolonial studies is how can we have a conversation about very different histories, right, and the sort of theoretical possibilities that can emerge from those differences, I think are exciting, and they're ways to bridge disciplines. I've been involved in a critique of the idea that postcolonial studies actually emerged in literary theory. I don't think so. I think it emerged early on in the conversation about postcolonial states that UNESCO was organizing in the 1960s. If you look at that, I've looked at it historically, there's sociologists, anthropologists, and historians. Many of them from Latin America, some of them from France and Europe. They're talking mainly about the Caribbean, but some other places. And so there was an early conversation across the Atlantic and indeed across the Pacific in that moment in which, you know, post-colonial states were coming into the UN, UNESCO conversations. There were projects and so on. I think that history has been a bit sort of written over by the boom in literary theory. And I've been interested in sort of recovering that and then connecting it to earlier conversations in Latin America, which actually you can trace them back to the late 18th century. And so, anyway, my interest is in pursuing those connections. At ELAS, we're hosting, I'll do my plug now, a conference, March 17th and 18th, to which you're all invited. It's called Deep Decolonization, Latin America and the Connected Histories of the Post-Colonial World. And in that event, mainly it's historians and anthropologists talking about how and why Latin America does or does not fit into a global history of decolonization. If you do a Google search, decolonization, you'll get about 300 titles, none of which have anything to do with Latin America. Latin America has been completely erased from the history of decolonization. It's basically understood as a post-war phenomenon. So also there we have this kind of universal Anglophone historicism built into the literature. And so we're going to try to break through that in this conference and produce an edited volume that's going to argue that actually decolonization is an old theme, which you can again trace to the late 18th century in the Americas, and that actually that conversation did rebound around the world. So please come to that event. I think it'll be interesting. It'll be here. And the Center for Postcolonial Studies is also supporting that, as is the Institute of Modern Language Research and Commonwealth Studies. I think I probably have used my 5 minutes, so I'll stop there.
Yes, I do hope if anyone has an interest in Latin American studies, then please do come to that conference in March. It's going to be great. So our next speaker then we have Professor Charles Forsdick, who is James Barrow Professor of French at the University of Liverpool, and he's also the AHRC Translating Cultures Theme Leadership Fellow. So again, we're moving more into transcultural, well, another sort of facet of post-colonial.
Thanks a lot, Catherine. So I want to give a sense of a sort of wider national, international frame here, and pick up on some of the discussions before the break around links between translation, politics of language, and post-colonial studies, much of which is bound up in some of the grants funded under the Translating Cultures theme. I've been the leadership fellow of that for 3 years, and I'm carrying on that role until 2018. One of the interesting things in that first session, and looking ahead to this session, is that a number of individuals involved today, but also a number of the projects they've mentioned are AHRC funded. So Matthew Brown was talking about transnationalising modern languages, which is one of the large translating cultures grants. Lucille and Louise have both had AHRC grants in this area. When Anna was talking about Nicole Chiara's NTU network on dialect literature, that was associated with translating cultures. And I could go on, and it's clear in some of the ideas and potential projects being mentioned that there's a lot of future work that could equally benefit from AHRC funding. One of the frustrating things, though, is that there's never really a proper audit across the large number of grants funded of work in post-colonial studies. And that's why the themes are useful, because the themes provide some sort of order to the wide range of projects of different scope and scale that are funded. A number of you will already be familiar with this. Translating cultures in the middle there. It's one of 4 key AHRC themes: science and culture, digital transformations, care for the future, which is looking largely at the usable parts, and translating cultures. There are also 2 other cross-council programs: connected communities and partnership for conflict, crime and security research. And it's really the bottom 3, translating cultures, connected communities, and what's called PACs, and also a bit of the work around care for the future, that engages very clearly with the concerns that interest us this afternoon around a loosely configured post-colonial area. Just to give you a sense of what translating cultures is about, those of you who don't know it well, and an idea of how the sort of work that's been funded under this theme intersects with post-colonial issues. You'll see from these 2 points here that there's an emphasis on, it's interesting that the focus is on transnational and globalised connections. The theme description doesn't talk about post-colonial in any way, but when I give you a few examples in a moment, you'll see how the interpretation of transnational and globalised connections in many instances directly intersects with post-colonial concerns. And underpinning the theme is this interest in diverse cultures, although one of the things that I've been trying to do from my position as theme leadership fellow is actually to pick up on that term diversity and to think about how diversity is often not a particularly helpful term, particularly when we subject it to post-colonial critique. So there's a wider frame there. Clearly, as the title suggests, central to what we're trying to do under the theme is to foreground translation. And this brings us back to those discussions of the intersections between post-colonial studies and translation studies, which really became prominent in the 1990s with that important collection by Harish Trivedi and Susan Bassnett and a number of other publications, and has continued to evolve subsequently. So that's the academic rationale. Thematically, and you can see this across the grants funded under the theme, number of areas of interest, some of which resonate directly with concerns in post-colonial studies around questions of humanitarianism, multilingualism, identity and migration, and various forms of subcultural language. And the crucial thing about translating cultures, and this again is where I think it comes close to post-colonial studies at its best when it works as a federating set of practices which encourage people to collaborate and think in new ways. One of the things we've been trying to do with the translating cultures theme is precisely to promote work across disciplines, across sectors, and across linguistic areas. So far, there are about 100 grants funded under the theme. I'm clearly not going to go through all of these, but there have also been a number of other awards. There's almost sort of a constellation of awards around the core Translating Cultures theme awards, which have engaged very strongly with the issues that interest us in the theme. We also link in with a number of other programmes, not least the European HERA programme on cultural encounters. And just to give you a flavour of some of the sort of work, so that's my 5 minutes, a flavour of some of the work, it really is across, these are awards I've pulled out which engage directly with postcolonialism in a range of ways. And you can see here that there's a geographical diversity, there's a chronological diversity. These are some fellowships, and they pick up on some of the issues we've heard before about this afternoon about avoiding presentism within postcolonial studies, allowing a geographical diversification, and seeing the ways in which postcolonialism may resonate with concerns across a whole range of disciplinary fields. And that's true as well with this wider constellation of awards, where we have, for example, that one up rather, Hilary Foote's project on NGOs, looking at humanitarianism from a post-colonial perspective. And if you go into Gateway for Research, which is the RC UK resource, you can draw out of that the 100 or so awards beyond the theme that I look after since 2007 that have engaged directly with post-colonialism, including Graham Huggins' network on post-colonial Europe, and a number of other prominent projects in the field. I'm not going to have time to talk about this in detail, but just in terms of what's emerging from the theme and how that in many ways chimes with work in post-colonial studies. Well, one thing that's clear is this increasing importance of translation across a range of fields, and also translation at the intersection of disciplinary fields. And I think there's this increasing interest in the way in which translation informs the work we're doing in post-colonial studies. There's also a sense that translation is not just something to do with the circulation of knowledge, it's also to do with the construction of knowledge, but also the destruction of knowledge. And I think from a post-colonial perspective in translation studies, very interesting work on the way in which the control of translation, the filtering of translation, can actually operate as a form of epistemicide. And that links into questions around the untranslatable as well. And it's interesting to see increasingly work in the post-colonial field around work of Barbara Cassin and Edouard Glissant on opacity, which looks at the power of the untranslatable within a post-colonial field. Number of concepts emerging from the translating cultures work, which I think are very important as well in the post-colonial field as it continues to evolve, around multilingualism, around postmonolingualism, around the sense of the translation zone, perhaps moving beyond the contact zone. And a crucial idea that's been alluded to already, that's teasing out the relationship between the post-colonial and the seeming rise of an interest in literature and in history and in other fields, in the global and the world. And I'll finish with the final point there, that one of the key things we've been trying to do with the translating cultures theme, and again it echoes with some of the ideas around post-colonialism, is that we've been, through a number of projects, thinking about the limits of intellectual approaches which are alinguistic or which are linguistically mute, which always reminds me of Harish Trivedi's critique of post-colonialism in the early years, when he said there's a risk if post-colonialism has ears only for English. And this is my plug. We've got an event coming up at the British Library on Friday. Feel free to come along. Sorry, I was a bit long there.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that on Friday. Okay, so I'd like to introduce now Professor Sandra Ponzanesi, who is Professor of Gender and Postcolonial Studies at Utrecht University, and she's also the Director of the Postcolonial Studies. Thank you.
Thank you. I tried to reopen things that probably were open. I'm making the European connection, the continental connection. I have myself a background on migration. I came to the Netherlands a long time ago and trying to set up, I studied in Italy, and there I was really concerned with the post-colonial, in what way the Italian could deal with the post-colonial past back in the 90s. So it was always a struggle to figure it out how to institutionalize a post-colonial field from the margin, from the south of Europe, west was rather silent. But now it's booming. Sanjay has already said there is a lot happening outside of the UK centre, the Anglophone centre. And when I arrived in the Netherlands many years ago, there was really no sense of how to set up the post-colonial and a lot of denial from the Dutch side about the colonial past. So it took a while, but we managed to establish the Postcolonial Studies Initiative in 2000. And you can see here all the different categories you can explore: research, publication, conference, and partners. I think it's useful to go really through a kind of order PowerPoint. So the center was set up it's in Utrecht University. Sounds like a strange place, but it's the largest university in the Netherlands. It's not far away from Amsterdam, a beautiful place. And the dome is the kind of dominant feature. And the Postcolonial Studies Initiative was created in 2010, together also with Professor Paulo de Madeiros, who now moved to the University of Warwick. And our idea was that we had to link undergraduate research to the research side of postcolonial studies across different disciplines. So not only the English literature, not only modern languages, not only gender studies, but really break through the different faculties and departments. Therefore, we really work very hard towards embedding these in many different sectors and trying to find funding through different research institutions. We've been supporting for many years by the Center for the Humanities, which is still headed by Professor Roti Braidotti, and now we've been supported by the CCHR, which is the Center for Citizenship and Human Rights, where actually this is a focus area of research across the whole university. And we've been very active. The idea is also to connect the activity of the PCI to the minor in postcolonial studies, but also to the various strands in the MA and the RMA, Research Master Program, the PhD. So all the activities that we coordinate are also exposed to different courses and classes of students, so that we really have this match of fantastic international scholars with undergraduate research, which is very important because there is a need really to think through the different constituencies about what the postcolonial is and what way it is still relevant today. We really have students from all over the world, but also trying to figure out how to understand contemporary culture through the lens of the postcolonial in a meaningful way. Not only the guilty politics, but also in what way we can still intervene. So make connection to gender study, but also to race and critical theory. And when we have issues like the Black Pig debates, how does the postcolonial can help to shed light? We have divided the activities in public lectures, and we are very proud of having a PCI film series, which is really running for the 6th edition, films running throughout the year, many international conferences, many international networks, grant applications, and we have an online presence which is not only the website, but also active on Facebook, newsletter, and a kind of networking through which we create a kind of European network. We've really been trying to reach to several postcolonial centers that are across Europe. The UK is very well organized, but there is a lot going on in Germany, in France, in Spain, in Italy, and also in Eastern Europe. So it's important to make these alliances, and I hope today will be the beginning of a new European or pan-European friendship. So this is a list of the great speakers. We opened in 2010 with Paul Gilroy, and you have a long list of eminent speakers who came, especially for the PCI. Lila Gandhi has already been mentioned, but recently we also had Elke Boma, Walter Miglioro, Rijkershow, John MacLeod. We've been working for years with the University of Leeds with the Center of Colonial and Postcolonial Studies. This is an example of the film series that we run every year. We try to think through, and we also have an edited volume which is called Postcolonial Cinema Studies. What is postcolonial cinema? Is that the topic of the film, the origin of the director, the aesthetic of the film, or the way we look at it? So we try to engage students to think through film, obviously postcolonial, but also through more mainstream one, through the kind of postcolonial optic. It's been going on. This is the one from this year, and I'm very happy that Those Who Feel the Fire Burning, a Dutch documentary, was went into even to run for the Oscar as best documentary. So it's really about the migrant crisis and how not to represent the refugees. Now, this is also many conferences that we organize. This is upcoming next week about the role of postcolonial public intellectuals. And the title is already very problematic and very provocative, so we're trying to figure it out how to untangle the label. And here we work together with people from religious studies, from postcolonial theory, but also political studies and history. So there is a lot of media studies, a lot of connection that we're trying to make. And also activities in which we bring all the BCI members together by presenting their publications and really talking through about what to do next. And this is one of the products. I've left self-promotion, a flyer on the table. It's called Postcolonial Transition in Europe, with Roman and Littlefield, just came out with a foreword by Paul Newboy as well. And really, we're really trying to do postcolonial studies in a European perspective. So this is not to be Eurocentric, but really to put Europe at the center of postcolonial studies and deconstruct it, because even in the ESSEC conference from '85, in which they said the title was Europe and its others, FIVAC already intervened, say it should be Europe as the other. So we should never make the constituency separated between Europe and the rest, but bring postcolonial theory at the heart, and also not think all the time in through linguistic patterns, the Francophone or the Italian postcolonial or the German or the Anglophone, but try translingually and translating and across Europe to see the patterns of colonization, decolonization, which are going on. So this is some of the network. Very quickly already mentioned the AHRC that we had with Graham Hagan. It was continued by the Postcolonial Europe Network until last year. It was funded by the Netherlands Research Institute. And now we have this ERC, the European Research Council, granted this wonderful project which is Connecting Europe. It's really about thinking how migrant women use digital media to create that digital diaspora, and whether this will create a question of emancipation and integration, or further ethnicization and segregation, if we want to call it that way. So some of the publications, Postcolonial Europe as a result of the AHRS intervention, the point of Europe as a result of the PEN, but also Postcolonial Transition that I just mentioned, as some of the example that we're trying to actually to say how to broaden the scope of the postcolonial in three directions. I would say use the postcolonial to contaminate different disciplinary fields, different media, not only languages, but bring it to conflict zone, bring it to cinema, bring it also to new media, which is a big issue at the moment. Think about the cultural industry, in what way the postcolonial is actually being co-opted by the industries because they're merchandise in itself. But also think of the postcolonial towards new field of studies like new materialism, the post-human, and the anthropocentric. So in what way we can make the postcolonial still effective through the different constituencies. There are publications in the different way, and this is the objective that I was hoping we will realize maybe today with all of you. Have maybe a network of postcolonial centers throughout Europe. Maybe a annual conference, some of it is covered by the Atlas, but I think it's maybe time to renovate the network. Have a common web portal, and possibly think of common applications from monstrous ones like the Horizon 2020 to maybe more approachable ones like the British Council and NVO, or the COST application and ITN, which are really more feasible. So this will be my networking idea for the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we can pick up on some of those points in the discussion at the end. So I'll move on now to our next speaker, Coro Juanena, who I'm not going to try and read out the name of the centre in Basque, but it's the Centre for Postcolonial Studies, KOIZ, in Bilbao.
Well, Arratsaldeon, pleasure bat izan da hemen, zuekin, that's mean good afternoon. It's a pleasure to stay here in Basque language. Thank you for inviting us to this meeting. Postcolonial studies in Basque Country and in Spain are still in very early stage. There isn't any specific department of postcolonial studies, and there is not any postgraduate training topical. There is only one research group in Universidad Autónoma de Madrid, but it's focused on Western Sahara, the former Spanish colony. Well, our colleague Juanena Smith is something with Matadero, but there is not really. Well, however, since a few years ago, this has begun to change. On the one hand, the colonial theories start to emerge in masters about Latin American thoughts or anthropology, philosophy, and some political research. Moreover, the postcolonial perspective ongoing in African studies or Asian studies. So it's increasing the number of research consultants and scholars who are interested in postcolonial study in all areas. Because of that, we have been founded in the end of the last year, 2015, our association. Kolonialismo, Osteko, Ikasketa, Zentroa, in Basque language. And as well as we have created a digital platform, because that has been used really just now. And, well, this is, okay. Well, what we think is that our geographic historical relation and idiomatic position, it's perfect to bridge between the colonial theories from Latin America and postcolonial studies from Anglo-Saxon tradition. So this platform I would like to show you. Let me see. Digital platform is first of all our main aid. We have what we want. We divided in 6 areas: arts and literature, theory, environment, indigenous issues. I don't know how to know. Indigenous issues, theory, and women's study. And to go to the well, what we want to do with this platform is to give research and let me see. Well, from the different areas, you can go and found, you have your own chat and forum, and you have also research, and you can chat with all the partners. And what we call, we have tools that we call KOIZ and you, that you can public things at the platform, and it's an interactive space to ongoing live communication between the members of the platform. So it's because we don't have in Spain, while it's getting on this postcolonial studies, is to give to the research and to the scholars and consultants also, and social movements also, some tools to change information and also to publish events about postcolonial studies. And so, well, I don't want to get many times, but just you are invited to go to the platform and also to publish all your course, postgraduate, and things like that. I don't know why. I would like to show you one thing. Let me see. Sorry. Because I would like you to show you the this partners area. This I have seen here. So this is the partners area. That's, as you can see, you have the 6 areas that we divided, and also, and from that you can find, you have a forum discussions about art and literature, economy, and so on. And also you have your profile, that is KOIZ and you, that's your activity, and you can also speak with friends, group, messengers, and upload notification and things like that. This is to, well, trying to get a network in, not only in Spain and in Basque Country, but also bridge Latin America studies, the colonial and post-colonial, no? Because we think it's a very demanding now in Spain and in Basque Country, and we are linked with different universities, also Basque Countries and Spanish University, and we will try to create some a course, online course, and also with at the university. Okay.
Okay, so we'll move straight on into our next speaker, Professor Anshuman Mondal, who is Professor of English and Postcolonial Studies at Brunel University, London, and he is the chair of the Postcolonial Studies Association. So thank you very much for joining us at such short notice.
Okay, so I'm not speaking on behalf of my position at Brunel today. I'm speaking on behalf of the Postcolonial Studies Association, of which I took over as chair in 2014. That very simple, short sentence pretty much sums up what PSA is. And unlike, in contrast, I would say, to many of the speakers here today, I mean, we are an association for individuals rather than for institutions. So I became chair on the back of a remit based on 4 eyes, basically. And the first one was to increase membership. The association is very young. It was essentially formed by early career scholars in 2008. And we are very aware that many of the senior members of the field are not members. And we feel that as an association to be so lopsided in terms of its generational intake is not entirely satisfactory. So that's one of my goals, is to increase membership. In fact, the membership secretary embarked upon a project to find out how many members we have still yet to recruit who are working in any way on issues of colonial and post-colonial imperial history and so on. And we have yet to recruit, and this is not by any means an exhaustive survey of people working in the field, 604 members. So that, given that we've already got 305 members anyway, there's actually quite a lot of us working in the field, and that's within the UK. The goal for us is to try and proselytise, and in that respect I'm here for that very basis. Hands up, how many of you have known of the Postcolonial Studies Association? Yeah, it is under half of this room. So I would like you to consider coming to join us. We are very cheap. There are 3 bands of membership, and the Band A membership, which is basically for developed countries, is £25 per annum. For Band C membership, which is for developing countries is something like £3 or £4 per year. So the goal is obviously for us to increase our membership there, because the more scholars who are working on, as we say, on post-colonial topics in any discipline or language, the more we can, as it were, facilitate a conversation across countries, across fields, across disciplines, and so on. Which brings me to the second one of my 4 eyes, which was to increase the international membership. Now we have 305 members, as I said. The majority of those members are UK based, but by no means exhaustively UK based. We have actually got members in 16 different countries, and that membership therefore is very wide but shallow. So I'm actually going on a research visit to Australia in a few weeks' time, and one of my tasks is to try and proselytise the membership of the association here. Because really, we are, as an association, we are the sum of our members. And unless we have those members participating in our activities, we are not doing what we're supposed to be doing. So that's our role there. And in many ways, there is an opportunity for us, that we feel, to provide, as it were, that linkage across some of the national and even regional post-colonial networks, as well as institutional centres as well. That brings us on to the third of my 4 eyes, which was precisely to collaborate with institutions. I'm here, one of the reasons I'm here is to meet people who are heads of centres of post-colonial studies, not only to alert them to the PSA existence, but also for us to begin a dialogue as to how and to what extent we might be able to facilitate these institutional partnerships with universities both here in the UK, in Europe, and elsewhere. We have a plan to try, as you can see from here, we do have some funding schemes, as well as an essay prize for young early career scholars as well. The funding schemes involve funding to go to conferences, to organise conferences, and also to assist scholars from lower income countries as well. And we also have a general research fund. So we are actually a funding body in that sense. But the bigger our membership, the more we can fund. And that's another reason why I'm so keen on increasing our membership, so that we have the opportunity to fund, to provide small scale funding. Some of these funds can be in the region of £500 or £600, so by no means negligible in that respect, especially when you come to travelling to conferences and so on. Longer term, we have some quite large ambitions about developing a fellowship scheme, a visiting fellowship scheme for countries from Global South to come to an exchange with research agendas with UK institutions. But that is something that is very much at its early think stage, and something for me to develop in conversation with hopefully some of the people here in this room. The website also has a list of all our members. Come up. So you can actually scroll through here, click on there, and read more about the research interests of our members. And so that in turn will give you a chance to facilitate links and collaborations on an individual basis with scholars who are working in your field or in your area as well. The final eye that my remit sort of covers as chair for this term is the hardest, and it's the one that I've found is the hardest nut to crack, and it's something that's been raised today already. The disciplinary focus of the PSA is strongly literary studies based. That's not to say it's exhaustively literary studies based. We do have some anthropologists, we do have some sociologists in our membership, we do have even a few historians. But we are predominantly a literary studies association at the moment, and I want that to be radically different by the time I step down in 2017. But it is proving to be a really, really hard nut to crack. mainly because of certain pre-existing assumptions about what postcolonial studies is on the part of those who are not based in literary departments. And on the other hand, the natural gravitational pull that exists already within literary studies towards postcolonialism. Trying to unbind that Gordian knot, trying to get historians, anthropologists, sociologists to come is proving to be the hardest challenge, and I'm hoping that today is going to be an occasion where I can reach out to people who are from different disciplines to say, you know, we don't have any agenda other than our members' agendas. You know, that's our existence. We are simply an association that facilitates dialogue and networks, knowledge exchange. But if you see here, our first bullet point here, you know, this is by no means exhaustive. We are hoping that people from anthropology, area studies, cultural studies, developmental studies, economics, gender studies, geography, history, international relations, linguistics, literary studies, political studies, sociology, and others will join us. How we fit in to the ecology of postcolonial studies as we are seeing it, you know, being mapped today, is a topic for discussion, and it's certainly something that we hope to be able to contribute to as we as a field move forward. I don't think I've got anything else to add to that, and I'm sure, you know, there's stuff we can contribute to in discussion.
So I'll hand over now then to Dr. Louise Hardwick, who is Senior Lecturer in French Studies at the University of Birmingham, and she is the lead on the FRANCOPOCO network that they have going there.
Thank you very much, Catherine. It's great to be here. Yes, FRANCOPOCO. It's the Francophone Colonial and Post-Colonial Network, and it's something that I formed. I joined Birmingham in 2010 and immediately realised that we had quite an unusual existing body of research and teaching expertise, specifically within French studies. So this was a way of consolidating and making it more visible, both internally and externally. Our area coverage is Francophone Caribbean, Canada, North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. Ably demonstrated by this, this nice image that we put together to try and demonstrate where we cover. Another key aim then, once we've kind of grouped ourselves within French, was to foster links with other parts of the university, in particular, our other colleagues in modern languages, and then looking beyond that, English, African studies, American and Canadian studies, history, to name just a few. So building capacity is something that this was all about. We have had significant success in grant capture since we were formed. We've brought in, members of our team brought in just under £500,000. Those include 2 big AHRC fellowships, my colleague Bernice's fellowship on desert fortresses looking at the Sahara, my own current project where I look at Francophone Caribbean literature and specifically the author Joseph Zobel. We've had a few PhDs funded. We've got public engagement funding recently from the AHRC to do a set of film screenings. We've also applied with the Marie Curie FP7 schemes. I was PI on a postdoctoral fellowship from 2012 to 2014 looking at post-colonial biopolitics, where an Italian researcher came to join me, and it was edifying to see that we'd never met before, but he kind of found the FRANCOPOCO pages online, so it does show that raising visibility does bring results. We've had several innovations to the curriculum, both at undergraduate and postgraduate level, and notably we've launched, Bernice and myself have launched the MA in Colonial and Post-Colonial Studies, which includes modules on world literature and post-colonial theory, and is really recruiting undergraduates from very diverse backgrounds and disciplines, so that's quite edifying as well. There is a national dimension. We're collaborating at the moment, in particular with the University of Nottingham, where I'm jointly supervising a PhD student. There's an international dimension with collaborations with Montpellier, Paris 3, Paris 4, so still got a kind of strong francophone theme running through what we do, unapologetically, because I think we have to recognise that this is something that we build up from different perspectives and areas. But there are also international collaborations with Georgia Institute of Technology and Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Impact has been mentioned a few times already this afternoon. Just to demonstrate some of the impact work that my own project includes, I've been working with the town of Rivière-Salée in southern Martinique, which is a town known to be in a more kind of deprived area of the island. So I've been working with local communities, working on my project on Joseph Zobel in collaboration with a project on literacy in the area with local librarians and schools and so on. I think, thinking about why we're all here today, it's incredibly exciting to be here. It's a chance to certainly highlight different PhD and postdoctoral opportunities, because in one of my kind of dreams we'd all be not swapping postdocs, but we'd certainly be saying, look, you know, if you want to move and come and do a postdoc, think about applying through Leverhulme, think about IEFs, Marie Curie's, various different schemes that are there. Certainly mentoring is something that's hit me today. I feel as though this has been a kind of mentoring event for me, just hearing different people talking about their different centres and activities. And perhaps sort of hoping that this centre could be an interdisciplinary forum for almost a meta-analysis of what's going on. So thinking about that hard sciences technique where you bring together lots of different data sets and look for overarching trends. I think that's a really exciting possibility that this could be opening on to. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we now have Dr. Veronica Barnsley, who is lecturer in 20th and 21st century literature at the University of Sheffield, and she is one of the founding members of the Northern Postcolonial Network.
Sorry, I was a bit remiss in not finding our website before. There we are. Hi, it's really exciting to be here actually, be it in the south. We don't want to be kind of too regionalist. We called ourselves Northern Postcolonial Network really for practical purposes, because we want to enable scholars working in institutions in the north, broadly defined, kind of including Scotland and maybe down as far as Nottingham, to get together easily for symposia, workshops, events and so on. And to share our research. So the network evolved out of a postcolonial reading group at the University of Manchester. We organised a series of seminars on the theme of development, and we invited colleagues in international development, cultural studies, and literary studies and history. And we found that we got a really interesting debate going. So we wanted to carry that on after we finished our PhDs. We started off by involving the universities of Manchester, Salford, Sheffield and Leeds, and we've been organising a series of events with, I suppose, two aims. So the first is regular contact and kind of sharing of ideas. Some of us are working in departments where we're the only post-colonialist, or we're one of the few, or we may, like at Sheffield, have a lot of post-colonial expertise, but it's very dispersed across different departments, and we don't all get together to talk about it. So we figured we could kind of fill a gap or kind of fulfill a need there. And secondly, to make local connections, so with groups outside of academia. So we've made partnerships with charities, community organisations, particularly under our current theme of human rights. We've been working with groups who work with refugees and asylum seekers. So kind of raising awareness and activism, but also a kind of research focus on the experiences of refugees in different northern cities, including Sheffield, Manchester and Leeds. So in that vein, also utilising cultural resources in the north. So we've been working with the Slavery Museum in Liverpool. I made a list, I probably won't remember them all, People's History Museum. And also media organisations. So Media City in Salford has a connection with the university, so we've been trying to involve media students in the kinds of activities that we're doing with refugees and thereby raise awareness. So we've had 3 events, I think, so far. An inaugural event at Liverpool John Moores, and then an event on human rights at Sheffield in collaboration with Sheffield Hallam. And also we've got an event next week, which some of you might have heard of, on asylum, refuge and migration. So that's happening at the University of Salford, their Media City campus, but it's in collaboration with Manchester. So we're trying to, partly because we haven't got much money, so we're trying to kind of pool resources by doing collaborative events between institutions, but we found that that's really beneficial both for researchers who are established, but also for early career and postgraduate researchers, so they can kind of get together and meet people who are actually working quite near them, but who they might not know about. And then we've planned an event, I think it's July, at Leeds, which will have more of a pedagogy focus. So it will be more about how do we teach postcolonial studies, do we call it global literature, do we call it world literature, do we call it postcolonial in some form, and you know, can we kind of refresh that debate a little bit and think about people who are just going into teaching postcolonial topics and want to think about how to do that. So that's kind of our remit. What we're interested in, I suppose, in terms of coming to groups and association kind of get-togethers like this, is in thinking about new collaborations that, as Anshuman was saying with the PSA, are kind of driven by the interests of our members. So we don't have any kind of particular agenda of our own. We've already spoken to the PSA about possible joint events, so we're interested in organising activities with other groups. I made a kind of little brainstorming list of things that our members might be interested in. One obviously is migration and asylum, because we're currently working on funding grants for, particularly to do with refugees in the north of Britain, but we're interested in that more broadly. Also animal studies, medical humanities, and the kind of co-production of cultural artefacts or creative production with groups outside of academia, and how does that work with research? How can we reflect on the kind of activities that are not necessarily aimed to produce research, but can nevertheless be useful in terms of researchers reflecting on their own function in their local communities. So that's one of the things. And I suppose the final thing is the regional focus of postcolonial studies. So, you know, how is it interesting to think about the postcolonial North or postcolonial London, postcolonial Manchester, and scholars have already started to think about that, and I think there's a lot more mileage to get out of that kind of research. I think that's all I was going to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're running just slightly over time. We have one final speaker in this panel. Dr. Claudia Gualtieri, who is Assistant Professor in Literature and Anglophone Cultures and Literatures at the University of Milan. So she's going to be talking about Milan, but also she's a visiting academic at the University of Oxford. So she's speaking today as a member of the Postcolonial Studies Research Group in Oxford.
Hello, just as thank you for telling all the necessary information. And as for Oxford, I'm just taking the word of Elke Bemer and Anki Mokherjee there, because they couldn't be here today for, you know, workloads and things. So they are certainly willing to, you know, take part in the network and bring their ideas and their suggestions. And as for myself, something has been said about Italy. There is a growing interest in Italy about migration, about postcolonial studies, about what the movement of people that is now clearly visible in Italy has brought in terms of concerns. There are some institutions that are dealing with the postcolonial studies very well, like the University of Padua with a project called Postcolonial Italy, or the University of Rome 3, where a number of scholars now are studying artistic productions by first and second generation migrant. And actually, it is debatable whether we could call them migrant, actually, because it's a new form of literature in Italian, and also artistic production in Italian that is growing in cinema, in drama, in many different performances, different forms of art. And also the issue of language is a debatable one, because these people may use in their performances Italian, but also their own languages, also local dialects. In the area where I come from, that is in the Po Valley, there are Senegalese and Italian mixed companies that, you know, act in Wolof, in Italian, in dialect, and, you know, many different languages all together. So that's another interesting aspect. And there are centers of cultural studies, particularly in Naples and Orientale, who also deal with post-colonial studies. In Milan, where I teach and where I come from, we don't have a well-structured center for, you know, post-colonial cultural studies, but the specific work we do is exactly to find a form of dialogue between post-colonial studies and cultural studies. So that is the specificity of what we try to do there. Post-colonial studies were started in Milan by Itala Vivan, who's not an old, very an old professor, you know, an intellectual, and we are now just a few there working on, you know, this dialogue about the future of cultural studies together with post-colonial studies. We've started a project with the University of Chemnitz, sponsored by the German Department of Foreign Affairs, and we had a conference in Milan in 2014 and one coming in June in Chemnitz, discussing borders and diasporas in Europe. And the focus of our analysis in theory, one of the main focuses is the notion of practice, not just in terms of activism, but also in terms of the everyday life, everyday production. This is one of the notions that migrant people, you know, give us, you know, their artistic production, what they do in the everyday cultural construction, you know, by meaning by culture what is in you know, cultural studies approach. There is another interesting project going on in Milan that is now within the university but might expand to a wider you know, transnational network that is called Discriminations and Inequalities. There is already a connection in place with the Race and Resistance network in Oxford, but I've been told that the organizing committee is willing to sort of extend their dialogue on discriminations and inequalities with other institutions and centers. So that's another good another proposal. And together with the issue of practice, I want to put on the table another issue that is the center of the interest in Milan where I work, and it is the issue of indigeneity. We are using it particularly with the Canadian First Nations or Aboriginal Australians, but it does not really need to be located spatially in those places. Looking at indigeneity gives, you know, different perspectives, also, you know, to sort of look at different cultures. So that's another interesting point we may put on the table. That's it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.